Warning that if you are with us this evening, we do record our meetings, and keep that in mind as your video or voice could appear and be recorded if you choose to do so. When we activate the chat, messages that you leave in the chat do not end up automatically in the video. We do, however, sometimes record the chat and share those with our guests. So do be aware of that as well. Hopefully my slides are still up. And hopefully Kate can nod at me if something crazy goes on. Welcome everyone to a slightly warm but not nearly as hot as it's going to get over the next few days evening, where we might actually be sick of sun already before we get to July. This is the June membership meeting of the West Seattle Transportation Coalition. We have a packed agenda this evening. We'll do our usual welcome and introductions and some quick business, approve previous meeting minutes from May. We will get underway with a quick conversation with our friends from Seattle Department of Transportation about West Marginal Way and any updates they have on the latest West Seattle Bridge repair stuff. We will then segue to a conversation with Washington State Ferries about the Fauntleroy Ferry Terminal Trestle and Transfer Span Replacement Project and Triangle Route Long Range Planning. We are also excited to that two of our board members are a part of their community advisory group. About 7:30, we will have a bit of a Q&A session with the Seattle Times Traffic Lab. We have Mike Lindblom and one of his colleagues coming to talk about covering transportation issues in and around Seattle. And then before we wrap up the evening, we will quickly do some board member elections, or really re-elections. I don't currently have any old business, and we have a little bit of new business that we will talk about, and then hopefully we will be done by 8:30. So if I crack the whip, I don't think it'll be sooner this month, but if I crack the whip to keep us moving and on time, you'll know why. We do thank you for joining us this evening. If you've never been with us before, the West Seattle Transportation Coalition is a peninsula-wide organization working to address transportation and commuting challenges for the nearly 100,000 people living and working on the West Seattle Peninsula. And we accomplish this through things like securing the support of residents of the peninsula, engaging elected officials at all levels, partnering with government agencies, as you see tonight, to talk about best outcomes for us here on the peninsula, as well as engaging with businesses, community organizations, neighborhood groups, and individuals. We get involved both in education and collecting feedback sometimes. Our goals are seeking an affordable and equitable transportation options, particularly in historically underserved neighborhoods. We'd love to see a transportation network that moves people and goods in an environmentally sustainable manner. And we support investments in transportation infrastructure to match Seattle's growth. Our specific priorities in 2021 are helping to see restored capacity in the West Seattle Bridge Transportation Corridor, continuing to advocate for funding maximum mobility while the high bridge is closed, continuing to support Sound Transit 3 light rail planning, especially here in our area, and monitoring the Delridge Way and Rapid Ride H multimodal project progress, which is currently well underway and starting to look really nice with painted lines and medians and all sorts of fun goodies that parts of the neighborhood have been waiting as long as 10 years or more to see. So that's pretty exciting. I have with me a fellow board member tonight, Kate Wells, who's helping to moderate and keep an eye on the chat, and I'll turn over to her for a moment.
Good evening, everyone. I will be taking over from Michael whenever there's a Q&A session, and there are a couple different ways you can help. I can ask your questions for you if you type your questions in the chat window, or if you would like to ask a question yourself, you can raise your hand and I'll do my best to keep track of which questions come in first and get to as many as I can in the order in which they're received. So thank you. Back to you, Michael.
Thank you, Kate. And my name is Michael Taylor Judd. I'm chair of the West Seattle Transportation Coalition. We aren't going to ask everyone to do verbal introductions, but I will direct you to the chat, which I will enable now. And we ask people to share name, any pronouns or access needs if needed, maybe what neighborhood you're from. And then this month's question, are you commuting to work, school, or somewhere this summer? And if so, how do you plan on getting there? If you have been out lately, you'll notice that the traffic is very quickly starting to return to, I guess not to normal, since we're clearly not normal, but that's what makes the traffic even worse. So are you making plans to perhaps commute differently than you did before, or are you hoping that everybody else does so that you can continue to get around? If you need to be added to our email list, if you didn't get the reminder with the list of topics for this month, you can send a private chat message. You can just switch that in the chat window to our fellow board member, John Wright, and he can make sure that we get you added so that you'll get the reminder for next month. Generally speaking, we only send out the one reminder a month to let you know what's coming up at our meeting. Occasionally, we may send another announcement during the month if there's some relevant info that we think our members should be aware of. And I see the chat window starting to fill up, so thank you very much. Moving very quickly along in the agenda. As I said, we do have previous meeting minutes for the month of May. If you've missed any of our past meetings, you can learn more by watching videos that are currently archived on our YouTube channel, which is that really ugly YouTube link right there. As well as, since we've recently started broadcasting live to our Facebook page, you can also find them under the live video section of our Facebook page, and feel free to join and follow us there for discussions all month long. I would entertain a motion from a board member to approve previous meeting minutes.
So moved.
I would like to make one change before you approve it. Phil Frick let me know that he was indeed late for the last meeting, so I'll be adding his name.
All right.
That's a deal.
And then I believe there was a second I heard as well.
Second.
All right. All those in favor of approving the previous meeting minutes with the change recommended by Kate, say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? And any abstentions? All right. Then without further ado, I will turn us over to our first conversation with the Seattle Department of Transportation. This evening, instead of Heather joining us, we've got some old friends coming back. Sarah Zora, who's the mobility manager for Reconnect West Seattle, as well as Brad Topol, who's the West Marginal Way project manager. And as always, Madison Lincolnmeyer, who's a communications lead, hanging out in the background and getting those slides moving for them. So Madison, I will stop sharing and feel free to grab and start showing slides.
Thank you. I think everyone can see it, and I'll hand it over to Brad.
Well, thank you all for having us tonight. I'm going to take it from Brad for 2 seconds. We were very much focused on the West Marginal Way comments that you had last month about wanting to bring back speeds and kind of crash data. So Brad's going to talk about that. And we weren't going to have many other updates. We wanted to let you know that we have the 60% design for the high bridge repair circulating right now, meaning that everyone's reviewing that from our agency partners as well as internal. And we do have notice to proceed for the high bridge repair. That means we have our Kramer North America, I think is the official name of the Kramer contractor that we're going with for the high bridge repair. So those are pretty good updates about the high bridge repair, and it's moving as expected and a little bit ahead of time right now in terms of notice to proceed. We were expecting that by the end of the month, and we're like a week early. So those are just the quick updates verbally about the high bridge and what is the most latest status on that. And then I'm going to pass it to Brad so we can get into the West Marginal Way, because I know we have just limited time tonight because you do have a packed agenda. So thank you so much. Go ahead, Brad.
Hello, welcome everyone, or welcome. I'm glad to be here. I'm Brad Topol. I work with SDOT's Vision Zero program, so I focus a lot on collisions and speeds and a lot of things across the city. So you would ask Trevor Partap to come back and talk about traffic speeds and collisions, and it made more sense for me to take that from him. So let's go ahead and start and jump right in. So just kind of some background on the data we pulled and what we're looking at. We pulled all of West Marginal Way between the Chelan 5-way and Highland Parkway from 2015 essentially to what we have currently from May. And so we're looking at that whole corridor, including those intersections. Next slide, thank you. What are we seeing out there in terms of collisions? Generically, year by year, we are seeing an increase in collisions that is likely related to the closure of the high bridge. Citywide, in 2020, we did see a reduction in total collisions while we kind of still saw a similar trend in fatalities, but we did tend to see lower injuries and serious injuries over time. So this does buck the trend because of the nature of the high bridge. Looking at the types of severities that we've been seeing out there most recently, we have in the last few years started to see a few more serious injury-related collisions, but again, kind of what we're seeing leading the trend more so is we're seeing a lot of property, a large amount of property damage only collisions, so fender benders, rear ends, things like that, where people aren't being transported to the hospital, they're just exchanging insurance and contact info. But when we look at, so we kind of peeled out the data from like pre-bridge closure to post-bridge closure to kind of look at, okay, if we actually compare those sets side by side and look at the proportions and the percentages of collisions that are happening, we're actually not seeing a huge change between the types of severity. We're still seeing a similar number of injury collisions and a similar number of property damage only. So we're not really seeing day-to-day a change. While we are seeing more collisions over time, we're not really seeing a specific pattern when it comes to severity. But we did look at types of collisions. So what are the types? We do see some changes related to those. So we're seeing a higher proportion. Again, these are proportions. These are percentages. So when we look at, we have about a year and a few months of post-bridge closure, and then we have a little over 5 years of pre-bridge closure. So to compare them side by side, we just kind of turn them into percentages to look at. That's the best way we can compare them. So looking at, I see a question about total number of collisions. I'll get to that in a second. What we're seeing, we are seeing a kind of more of an increase in rear end collisions, which seem to concentrate a lot more around the Highland Parkway intersection and a little bit on the north end, right? So where you're seeing that traffic back up at those major intersections seems to be where we're seeing a lot of the rear end collisions. And the things like head-on and fixed object collisions. Fixed object would be like running off the road or hitting a tree or a light pole or something like that. We're seeing lower potentials for that and more of these kind of people bumping into each other, rear end collisions happening more. Next slide, please. So getting into a little bit of the numbers. So kind of where are we seeing the collisions increase? Not surprisingly, we're seeing them increase at the major intersections. So we are seeing increases across the board, right? Because we see that 2020 going up and our 2021 projected, which is based on what we have up to May going up. And so, Highland Parkway intersection, typically, before the bridge closure, you're seeing about 3 collisions a year, and now we're seeing that jump up to about 14 collisions in the last year plus. And so that's like the big one leading it, right? That's where we're seeing the biggest number of intersections. And right, we have a lot of turning vehicles there. We have a lot going on. Not that there isn't a lot going on at the Chelan 5-way, but it seems like there's a lot more turning movements there and a lot more interactions related there. So maybe that's just my speculation as to why that's going up there. But Chelan 5-way has much lower numbers. And so we're seeing it jump from, we get a collision a year out there to 2 to 3 now or something like that. So Mid-block, we saw slight increases, but again, those seem to be really heavily focused on, we saw more of them on the south end because you are seeing those bigger backups at Highland Parkway, or still large backups at Highland Parkway. And we did see a little bit of uptick around the Chelan backup for the northbound as well. So next slide. Jumping into speeds, and I'm seeing the chat pop up, so I'll try to bring that up in a second and go back and address those. We asked to report on speeds, and so I kind of wanted to talk about like what are the things over time that may have influenced speeds on the corridor. In October 2019, we installed a southbound lane drop at Alaska Street near the Duwamish Longhouse. That was to provide some additional parking and make, as an interim, provide a better pedestrian crossing for them while we're working on our signal design to install a pedestrian crossing signal this year. In May 2020, we reduced speeds on West Marginal Way from 40 to 30 miles an hour. That was part of our citywide arterial speed reduction program we did. That's one of our Vision Zero initiatives. And then we came back in September and saw installed radar feedback signs, which are the ones like you see in this photo where you see it tells you your speed. And so looking at the data, this is the data from Dakota Street. We have a good amount of data from 2019, kind of pre-bridge closure, and then kind of extending into the end of last year. And so this is separated. Orange is southbound, blue is northbound, and I separated those out just because the lane drop seems to have an impact on the southbound. So what we saw is that it looks like from the southbound direction, adding that lane drop did decrease speeds a little bit. Now, again, these are small, right? The graph makes them look big, but they're only a few miles an hour here. But what we're seeing in our collision data citywide is that sometimes these small reductions, if you have a 5% reduction in speeds or a 6 or 7% reduction in speeds, which really is can be a mile or two per hour, has led in other locations to be like 30%. 20 to 30% reduction in total collisions and similar numbers for injuries. So that's kind of why we think it's important that even this, this is the average amongst all the vehicles traveling in there. So it seems like the lane drop had an impact in the southbound direction. And then our speed limit signs on this corridor, while on many other corridors, especially, we've had a strong correlation in speed reduction when we've reduced speeds. West Marginal Way, we didn't, most likely because it's an industrial corridor. It doesn't have those pedestrian generators. It doesn't communicate to you that this is a place where you expect to encounter other elements that you would see, business districts and things like that. So, the street may communicate to you to drive fast. So we didn't see that signs played a big difference, but the feedback signs seem to be the biggest thing. And we installed those after we looked at the July data and saw, okay, our signs aren't working. What's the next step? The next step is radar feedback signs. So we came back and did that. Next slide, please. And then I just pulled some data. We didn't have data. We have data at these 3 locations. We didn't have all of them back to 2019, but we had a bunch from 2020 and just kind of showing that generically, Dakota and Alaska have similar speeds, but down at Front Street, we seem to see higher speeds. And that could just be, it's just more open in that area, where in Alaska and Dakota, you see more vehicles traveling in a single lane. And so we think that continues to keep speeds a little bit lower.
Can I get you to pause on that last slide for just a moment, Brad?
Right,
because I just want to highlight one of the issues that we keep raising, and your graph perfectly captures it now. So we're glad that speeds are low. I want to make that abundantly clear, or lower, I should say. We want to make that abundantly clear. Our concern, though, is that looking at the data you have here, if I look back to April 20, we have, generally speaking, most people were going, right around the speed limit of 40, or maybe they were going a couple miles over 40. And now that we've dropped it to 30, even though overall the average or the median speed has come down, the median speed now means that folks are going 7 to 9 miles per hour above the speed limit. And so we're particularly concerned that everyone who is following the speed limit is now finding it a much more dangerous roadway to be driving on, because people are flying past them at a much larger differential than they were before.
Yeah, that's a good point, and West Marginal is definitely unique, and it's definitely a challenging street when you look at the majority of the rest of our arterial network, right? Like I was mentioning, that lack of land use that would communicate to you to drive slow. You know, especially on the southbound side, on that west side, you know, you do have, on the north end, you have businesses and driveways, but at some point you just hit the ridge, right? It's just that wall of leaves and trees, and you know, everything's communicating that there's no reason that you'll ever have to slow down. So that's a concern, but you know, overall, I think we're seeing that, you know, citywide, where we reduce speeds and where we get lower speeds on, you know, on average overall, you know, that these types of treatments, they do pull down some of those really high end speeders. And, you know, yes, you were right that it was 40 before, and people were, you know, typically traveling around, for the average median speed was around 40 miles an hour. But, you know, we're continuing to focus our efforts across the city on just reducing speeds generically, because at 40 miles an hour, you have a much lower rate of survival if you're hit by a vehicle. Plus, you know, higher speeds typically lead to, you know, more accidents and more higher severity in collisions. Yes, West Seattle is totally unique right now because of the high bridge closure, and there's, you know, large degree of frustration that we can't measure. And speed, you know, speed differentials are something that we are tracking and trying to be cognizant of. And so, like, we didn't, you know, we weren't going to make the street 25 like we did a lot of our other arterials. But we are continuing to kind of watch this street and see what's going on with it. So,
could I?
Why not 35?
Quick
Why not 35?
because 30 has a higher, you know, we want
The reality is people are not driving it. I drove it the other day. I don't drive that much. I'm going 45, 50 like I always have for the last 20 years, and I'm being passed. And speeds have not changed. Speed, Mike did mention, up significantly. It's less safe than it used to be.
Well, that's something that
There's
we're
no-
still.
Let's let Brad finish.
You know, we know, like I said, we know that West Marginal is definitely a unique circumstance. I mean, you know, we're continuing to review it. You know, the data, what we're seeing in the data, like I said, we're not necessarily seeing an increase in severity. We are seeing an increase in collisions overall, but again, that could very easily be related just to the higher numbers we're seeing out there, right? The higher numbers of volumes and everything. And yes, you are correct. We do see high speed passing, especially in that right lane, and that's something that we're continuing to work on through some of our other projects to kind of reduce that. You know, we don't want to see that, and we're continuing to look for other methods to treat and reduce those types of interactions. But it is a unique one. Go ahead, Martin.
From the data, it doesn't look like you're changing the speed. It's really really changed the collision statistics.
Yeah, I mean, it's nuanced, right? Because we saw like you had about 10 to 15,000 vehicles in 2019 and before the bridge closure, and now we have 25,000 plus. And so that's very unique. And we have done, you know, I'm happy to come back and look at the other detour routes and kind of talk about the trends we're seeing. I haven't dove into those recently. We did early in the pandemic, but
it seems, wouldn't it have been a wiser choice to wait until the bridge reopened before you changed the speed on West Marginal? Or did you change the speed on West Marginal because it'd be more crowded, and you thought by reducing the speed, it had managed the flow of traffic better at a lower speed?
Well, this is part of our citywide arterial speed reduction efforts, and so we were already programming this work in early 2020 when everything happened, and continued to move forward throughout the rest of the city. So we weren't necessarily taking the high bridge closure into effect, but you know, from a safety, when we're seeing, you know, we did this based on some of our pilot studies that saw that when we reduce speeds by, you know, when we reduced speed limits and added more speed limit sides to communicate that, you know, we saw these smaller reductions, 5 to 6 or 7% in speeds, but that led to a larger reduction in collisions. And so when our goal is to reduce fatal and serious injuries and reduce collisions citywide, we're going to take those actions if we see that they have value at this point in time. And so the whole argument of wait, we're always saying, well, why wait? Why wait for safety? Why wait to try something? Listen, I don't disagree that West Marginal isn't unique, and that that is a very challenging street. We totally acknowledge that. And we're going to continue to look at other ways and other things we can do to further reduce those speeds and increase safety here and in other locations citywide. But this was like speed limit reduction is like the signs are like the first step, and the feedback's like step 1.5, and then we're going to continue to look at other things.
I think it makes sense, but and at the same time, the data doesn't bear out that speed reduction has changed the collision statistics.
Yeah, but it's hard to draw those direct in the high bridge closure environment. It's West Seattle itself stands out for sure, right, compared to citywide trends. So it can be hard to pull those apart and say this was that and the other thing was this and related to the high bridge closure. And so, but I'm happy to come back and report more on all the detour routes later.
Could you please briefly go back to that one slide that showed the type of collisions?
Mm-hmm. Yep. So yeah, as a proportion, we are seeing a higher rear end collisions.
I guess I mean, theoretically, the types of collisions matter too, though, right? Because a head-on collision is probably going to have a lot worse outcome than a rear-end outcome.
Yeah, that's true. But I mean, our severities are still similar from before, so it's a little. I mean, there's never always. It's rare that you have this very direct yes, this and that with a lot of this collision data. So, and again, everything is more nuanced with the bridge being closed, but. Yeah, this is kind of what we're seeing. So.
All right, Kate, do we have maybe one question out of the chat that's a good one to cover and then so we can wrap up here?
Oh, let's see. Let's see. Brad, your graphs were pre and post bridge closure. Do you have any further breakdown pre and post speed limit reduction and addition of the speed monitoring signs?
Do we have,
John, is that like a little more granular?
Speed related to pre and post bridge closure? Is that what?
Do you want to pop in, John?
Yeah, I mean, some of the earlier things you were presenting, you were comparing the pre-bridge closure or before the bridge was closed, and yeah, like this. Mm-hmm. You know, I was just wondering if there's any data like the bridge closed that breaks it down. You know, once initiated the efforts to reduce speed, you know, the speed limit reduction and stuff.
How do the speeds change when the bridge is closed versus when they're open? So if we go to that Dakota slide, Madison, if you can go to the big speed one. Oh, one more back, please. Yeah, this one. So right, like collision data, right? We get a constant feed, right? As SPD responds and produces collision reports, and those feed into our systems, right? We can look at everything by a day and month value. Where our speed studies, we have to physically go out there and take those speed studies. And so, what we see here is the 3 data points on the left are pre-bridge closure, and the 3 data points on the right are post-bridge closure. You know, and when you're looking at like the orange line specifically, like northbound, I mean, it's exactly the same between December and April, and you see that even uptick in July. So I guess to maybe answer your question, it's not that we necessarily saw speeds change due to the bridge closure on West Marginal Way. It seemed that people continue to travel at the same speeds that they always have been out there. But when we were taking these actions and putting in this lane drop in front of the longhouse or doing the feedback signs, those are the things that seem to impact behavior more so than just people traveling on, you know, I could see that you might think, okay, with a detour route, people are going to blast as fast as they can go and speeds might increase because of the fact that there's frustration and people have lost, you know, they're losing time and they want to make that up somehow. But we didn't really see that necessarily in the data. Seemed like people were continuing to travel on as they had at those speeds on West Marginal Way.
All right. Well, we would love to have you back to talk more speed limits on other roads anytime. I think you know, Brad, that we're very wonky here, so we love graphs like this. So feel free to come and chat with us at length about them anytime.
Sure thing. Sure thing. Thank you very much, everyone.
All right, I want to thank you and Sarah for taking a few minutes out of your day to be with us today.
Michael, is there any way that you could ask Sarah and or Brad to answer the last question about the bike lane decision?
Go right ahead. What's your question on the bike lane decision?
So Kate was wondering if when any idea when the bike decision might happen. Please prioritize safety over the perception that the second lane is needed, is the comment in the chat that I just read. Sorry, Kate, I'm just reading for you.
And it would help us modulate some of the speeding that's still happening.
Yep, I think you know, we're getting close to a decision. It is quite a complex and dynamic situation that we're in, to have a proposal to you know, reuse that outside southbound lane for something other than motorists. So we hope that we will have a decision from the city coming up here pretty soon. That is all I can really say about that right now.
All right.
Sorry.
Well, hopefully you'll come back when we got a decision.
We will come back. Yes. Thank you, Michael.
All right. Thank you very much, guys. I am going to get back here to sharing the screen. All right. So keeping us moving along here. Next up, we have a conversation with Washington State Ferries about the Fauntleroy Ferry Terminal Trestle and Transfer Span Replacement Project, as well as long-term planning. We have Dave Sowers, who's Director of Terminal Engineering with us. We also have Liz Faulkner from Enviro Issues, who's working with them on the project. You can learn more at that web address right there. And while they get ready to, Liz, I believe, will be sharing. So while she gets ready to share out her screen, I will point out that we've got 2 board members who've been named to the Community Advisory Group, John Wright and Victoria Nelson. And so if they've got some questions or thoughts to share, hopefully they can do so at the end as well. Take it away, Dave.
Yeah, thank you, Michael. Appreciate it. And thanks for having us here today. And of course, thanks, Liz Faulkner, for helping me out with the presentation. I'm going to make sure you field all the tough questions when we're done. First, as you may know, we were expecting to start up this project last year with the obvious changes that occurred and its related impacts on ridership and the transportation landscape. We proceeded more cautiously until we kicked off the project with community engagement via some virtual meetings this March. But our need to address the aging terminal at Fauntleroy is a top priority for Washington State Ferries. I'll show you some of that reasons why here in a minute, as is our commitment to a robust community engagement process. So now that we've launched this project to replace the terminal, we are gathering input on our plans to engage the public and making the rounds to share the project background and basics to sort of lay the groundwork for that effort. Doing this project in a collaborative way means that we can continue to provide safe and reliable ferry service and be good neighbors and stewards of the taxpayers' dollars, which is always important. Tonight, I kind of want to hit on a couple of key areas why the project is needed. I'm sure you've been down to Fauntleroy and have some thoughts about this. What the planning phase includes, and I'll try to lay that out in terms of the steps that have to happen between today and when the project's concluded. How community members and groups can be engaged and involved in this process. And then we've saved some time at the end for questions. So let's talk a little bit about who the terminal serves. So this is an important terminal to this community. Obviously, we served about 3 million riders on this route. We call it the Triangle Route between West Seattle, Vashon Island, and the Kitsap Peninsula. Ridership, as you can imagine, is down as a result of the pandemic, but it is starting to come back, and we're seeing riderships returning to about 80% of what it was the same time in, the same week, the same month in 2019. So again, that means it's being well used, well loved, but I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the challenges that we have with the terminal and why it's so important that we replace this facility. And those challenges are, for the engineers in the room, the seismic and structural issues that the facility faces. The terminal sits on top of timber piling and timber piers that were installed in 1957 and 1984. So of course, it's no surprise that it's showing its age. Many parts of the facility on this graphic are vulnerable to earthquakes and are due to replacement. not only from that standpoint, but just in terms of their age and service life. Because of this, our crews conduct regular inspections, and in recent years, and you may have seen this late last year, we had to, it was early this spring, we needed to replace individual piles to keep the facility safe and operational. So they actually go in underneath the dock at low tides, and they find these piles that are rotted through or have lost a lot of their section, and they jacket those piles and protect them and buy some more life out of those. But of course, those don't meet any of the seismic needs of this facility, and they don't address liquefiable soils and soft ground and all those other things. So clearly the seismic and structural challenges of this facility require its replacement. The other big challenge for us out here at Fauntleroy is rising sea level. And as this picture would show, it's actually the current sea level that's a problem as well. This is one of the lowest facilities or docks in all of our fleet. When the water is that high, it poses damage risk to bumping up against the dock. You can see the utilities that are hanging off the dock here are exposed and vulnerable. And so this is another reason for us as we replace this facility to come in with a facility that's designed for our current projections of sea level rise and storm surge, and to raise this dock up a few feet to meet those current standards and alleviate this risk that you can see in this picture. And of course, for the non-engineers in the room who aren't paying too close attention to the type of facility, is everybody here, and I heard it on the last presentation, is an expert in traffic operations, and certainly the operational challenges out here are obvious. I'll give a couple of the highlights of why they are. And part of that is that, in the 1950s, the size of vessels and the population in West Seattle was obviously much different than it is today. Now this route is served by 224 car vessels and a 90 car vessel. There's, in our long range plan, we'll talk about that in a minute, there's an interest in increasing that to 324 car vessels. The dock, as you can see in the middle of this picture, only holds about 80 cars. And so from a vehicle processing standpoint, we are loading a boat at the same time we're bringing those last 30 to 40 cars through the toll booth. And that takes a lot of extra time. It's not efficient. And in addition to that, we also have pedestrians, we have motorcycles that like to drive the wrong way down the exit lanes. We have the challenges of Fauntleroy Way and that intersection. There's just a whole host. It doesn't take an expert to go out there and figure that there's a number of operational challenges. And so those are things that we're also looking at as part of this project and part of the replacement of the trestle. So I want to just talk a little bit about the long range plan. I know that was one of the requests in this presentation. This was developed in it started in 2016, 2017. We finalized the report in 2019. And one of the recommendations in that report was the replacement of the Fauntleroy trestle. Other improvements to this route include vessel upgrades, including adding a third 124 car vessel. We have other preservation improvement projects at Southworth and Vashon that are also highlighted in the long range plan, as well as many of you have heard are the initiatives underway to electrify our fleet. And in doing so, we need to electrify these routes and bring the service to Fauntleroy that then can charge the hybrid electric boats that are slated for this route later in this decade. So a variety of things are captured in that long range plan. And in addition to some of the other things on the sheet, adding more service in the winter and using all 124 car vessels. So a lot of things that we're trying to tackle, and this project is attempting to try to capture, for example, the electrifications, to try to capture that all in one project. So let's talk a little bit about the timeline. I mentioned that in the fall of 16 and up through 2019, we had developed a triangle task force to look at a lot of these operational changes. And we actually through a very robust community involvement process, came up with some really good operational improvements to the terminal to help streamline vehicle processing. And then in the spring of 19, we launched that new sailing schedule, and we're using that today. At the same time, in the summer of 2019, we produced the long-range plan, which I mentioned before. And so where are we at today? So again, I mentioned we had intended that this project would really get started in earnest in 2020. Here we are in this early 21, in this planning phase where we start the initial steps to evaluate and begin selecting alternatives that feed into an environmental process that would begin in 2023 and beyond. And then, of course, then formal design and formal construction. Hang on here, Liz, let me try to keep up with you here. So the Pell process, I wanted to talk a little bit about that. It's a fairly new process to Washington State DOT. We've done a few projects with it. The key here, and I'll just kind of summarize what's on the slide. It's called a Planning and Environmental Linkages Study, and we're working closely with Federal Highway Administration. They're our lead federal agency on this project. And what we'll be doing is identifying those issues. I've talked about some of them previously, environmental concerns, the community's values, certainly the transportation connections and the overall operations, and then the economic goals early in the project planning process. What this does is helps us develop better alternatives that we can then take into the formal environmental process, whereby we would use an EIS or an EA to develop an environmental document from which we would get a record of decision and then advance the design. So that's a really high clip view of what Pell is. We're excited that it helps to streamline and make this initial process a little bit more efficient. And I don't want to say that in a way that changes or shortens the duration, but it helps us set up better the alternatives process so that when we go into the environmental process, we're better suited to have addressed the needs of the community and these other issues shared on this slide. So let's take a look at this process. Again, I don't have years on this. I'll show you that here in a second. The process involves gathering input and identifying needs. That's the step that we're going to begin here this summer. What are the needs? Well, I showed you 3 of them in those early slides. Once we've fully incorporated the needs of the project into how we look at this, then we'll develop alternatives that try to address those various needs. And again, I'll talk a little bit more about how all of these various groups or advisory groups are engaged in that. There's an analysis, a fatal flaw analysis of the high level concepts. And then out of that comes some preferred alternatives that we will evaluate for further study and develop this Pell report. The general public will be involved all along. We've had kickoff meetings, like I said, in March. We're doing community meetings along the way. We're certainly doing outreach like tonight, where we can seek input from folks like you that are close to the community and certainly have their pulse on the transportation challenges of West Seattle. And then we have what I mentioned earlier, these advisory groups, which we've recruited 3 different groups to assist us, and John and Victoria are on the call to represent the, to represent the community advisory group. We also have a technical advisory group and a executive advisory group. But let me just kind of summarize what those 3 groups do. So the community advisory group is comprised of community members that bring different experiences and perspectives and needs. I mentioned John and Victoria's participation. We have also active participation from all 3 destinations on the route. Certainly West Seattle is there. Southworth is well represented, as is Vashon Island. And so that's important to give us a robust and thorough kind of understanding of the needs of the community. The technical advisory group is comprised of local and state staff from transit agencies, federal partners, and tribes, and they will kind of review and evaluate the project elements and proposals from a technical perspective, just to make sure that we're in alignment with local regional policy, laws and the things that are, that we need to work through from a technical standpoint. And then finally, the executive advisory group is comprised of local and state appointed or elected officials, jurisdictional and agency leadership, and of course our federal partner, FHWA, and members of the tribes. And there are a number of tribes that have usual and accustomed treaty fishing rights that we need to engage with in whatever we do on this route. We also want to address some of the underserved and underrepresented communities. Clearly our ferry customers are a big component of all this, and many of them on the community advisory group use the route regularly, or family use the route regularly. And then each of these routes has ferry advisory committees, and each of these communities have ferry advisory committee members. And so they're an important, they're diehard ferry guys and gals that enjoy talking about ferries and how service can be improved. And they had a big role in the long range plan, as well as the triangle task force study that we embarked on in 2016, and actually changed how we operate the terminal and made made everything a little bit more efficient. So those are basically the various groups of people that are involved in this important process. So what's next? Well, again, we're going to continue collaborating with these advisory groups. We're meeting monthly or every other month with those groups. We will continue to do community briefings like we are tonight upon request. We want people to be active and engaged and if interested in this project, to provide input. We'll host online community meetings until it's safe to meet in person. We got a lot of feedback last night from people. Of course, you can imagine in the old days, we would have to go to each of the three corners of the route and have a meeting and spend all that time. And now you can get all those folks together in one virtual space, and everybody loves it. It's really, kind of one of the silver linings of this whole, what we've gone through for the last year. So that's great. We're doing that. We hope to get out and see people in face to face again, but we'll continue to do these online. Even after that. And then regularly sharing information on our website, through our listserv, social media, and other outlets, and then partnering with community and social service organizations to reach those folks that are typically underrepresented or underserved on this route. And I think that's about all I had. I don't know, Liz, if you have anything that you think I missed or should have emphasized a little bit more, if you want to add anything, but.
You covered it. Let's move to questions.
Okay. Trying to keep you guys on schedule here. Michael?
While Kate checks the chat, John or Vicky, did you want to share anything really quickly?
No, I put a question in the chat, but no, I thought last night's meeting was good to be introduced to everybody that's going to be serving on the community advisory group, and I'm just eager to see how it continues to grow and unfold.
Thanks, Victoria.
Yeah, I guess same thing for me. Just looking to, yesterday was a lot of introductory business. Looking forward to, starting the meat of working on the project.
All right, Kate, what do we got in the chat window?
So during the construction phase of the project, will ferries still come to the dock, or will they be redirected elsewhere?
Well, I think that's one of the big challenges we're going to be faced in this whole process is, if we could just fly in a brand new ferry terminal and set it down, it would be wonderful, but that's not the way these things work. For those of you that have been following our Seattle Coleman Dock project, you can see the challenges we face trying to keep an active, in that case, a multi-destination facility with multiple vessels, 3 different slips, all trying to clamor to load and unload folks. It's very challenging, and it's we have a large dock and a lot of space to work there, and a lot of uplands to stage. Here we don't have those things, and so construction, we're already starting to look a little bit at how that would work. Just to replace everything in kind would be very challenging, because you still need space to do the work, and we have problems when we just go out there to replace 1 or 2 piles once a year. Replacing, 2 or 3 lanes of dock at a time is going to be very challenging. So, I don't want to start speculating too much about rerouting ferries. I would like the project to continue to provide regular service on time and from Fauntleroy, but I think everything's on the table when it comes to how we would try to construct this. And if there's an easier way to do it by routing service, I think we would certainly look into that. That was a long answer to the simple question.
All right, next one. Is there anyone representing the Morgan Junction on the advisory group?
Boy, I don't know where the Morgan Junction is.
Dave, I'll take this one. Deb, I think this is your question. Yes, we do have someone representing from the Morgan Junction area, Michelle McCormick.
And Dave, this is Deb Barker. You really need to change your answer to not say, I don't know where Morgan Junction is, because Morgan Junction is where the ferry traffic goes through when the high bridge is open.
Oh,
California and Fauntleroy.
okay, well, good.
Yeah. All right.
A lot of stuff on this project, so I hope
There you go.
don't mind me answering.
We'll be inviting you out to a Morgan Junction community meeting, which happens quarterly. But before then, we'll pepper you with info about Morgan Junction. Thanks.
I like that. Good, thank you. Appreciate that, Deborah.
Can I
Next
ask one more question real quick? I was just curious, David, is there any, and you may not know this tonight, but is there any crossover with the West Seattle Bridge construction and light rail projects with this one with respect to traffic?
Well, early on, last spring, when all things kind of came to a head, we were quite actively involved providing updates. There was a lot of information flying back and forth, and ferries wanted to participate in those early discussions with how the bridge project was moving along. We're still engaged, but less so now. The West Seattle Bridge project, in my opinion, is further ahead of where we're at this point. We don't have a contractor. I think, as Sarah said earlier, yet. Obviously, we're still in the very preliminary stages. So our thinking is the bridge will be up and running and actively used long before we're into a construction mode.
Next question. If the ferry size has increased from 90 to over 120 already, is it too short-sighted to only build the new dock to hold the current limit? Should it be built bigger to avoid future scale issues?
Well, the size of the dock is going to be driven by a lot of different things. Certainly there's environmental challenges with expanding the existing facility. And so we're going to look at that. We're going to have to assess that. Are there other technological improvements that can be made to help process vehicles faster, and those vehicles would continue to stage on Fauntleroy? I mean, I don't think anybody wants vehicles staging on Fauntleroy, but that's something we're going to look at as their technologies to process faster so folks aren't using toll booths. Our design standards have us at least at the size of the vessel. So in this case, a 124 car vessel. That would increase the dock by almost 50% if we had to meet that standard. So we're going to be looking at all of that. I don't want to get it too far ahead of the process. We've got obviously a diverse group of riders and community members. People have a whole range of ideas on what we should do, and there's no shortage of opinions. So we're going to be trying to look at all that, look at some consensus building, and try to figure out what's the best fit for this particular location.
Okay. I've got one last question if there's time, Michael. I've heard rumblings about a different arrangement for pedestrians to board, and I just wondered if that's something that's being considered.
Are you talking about how we load and unload pedestrians?
Yeah.
Yeah. So one of one of the questions we get a lot is, are we going to install some sort of overhead loading facility at Fauntleroy? And you're aware we have those types of facilities at Kingston, Edmonds, some of our heavier routes with heavier pedestrian traffic. The advantages of overhead loading include eliminating some of that time where the pedestrians have to walk off the car deck, dodge cars, and bicycles and all of that has to happen. It wastes a few minutes at the beginning of the sailing and the beginning of the departure. And so if you can take those minutes and put those folks safely out of the way on their own overhead structure, then we have a better chance of maintaining our turnaround times, our overall on-time performance. And so those are all things that we're going to look at. But the community has some input on that as well. Overhead loading structure is going to be out of the water and kind of touches up on that second passenger deck. You can kind of see it on this boat behind me, and you can see it kind of coming on. This is at Mukilteo where it kind of comes off. So it's an elevated structure and maybe not too visually exciting to people, but it operationally helps us with some of the issues that we're wrestling with. And so I think it's all of this sort of trade-offs. Is that something that helps us move people more safely, more efficiently, keeps our boats on time, or do we continue to have people walking across the car deck? And it's a function of how many people are walking in part, but it's also just a function of safety and giving space to those various modes and as efficiently as possible. So those are all things that we'll look at.
Okay.
That's the question.
Great, thank you. I've got nothing else in the chat and I don't see any raised hands.
All right, that keeps us right on time with the agenda. David, thank you so much for coming out. We always like it when you or Hadley or various other folks come out and join us. We have a lot of love for the ferry system, and there's a lot of tight connections between West Seattle and Vashon Island, and I know folks want to continue to see respected. So we look forward to participating in this process with you as it goes forward.
Thank you, Michael.
All right, So keeping us moving along. Before I get to our next guest of the night, quick ad time, as some folks have gotten used to seeing me do here. If you missed, there's an election that's going to be happening and a primary that's happening during the summer. Don't let the heat make you forget. So get informed and hear where candidates stand on transportation, equity, and in the environment. There have been a couple of forums hosted recently by the Move All Seattle Sustainably Coalition and other organizations, which included 350 Seattle, Cascade Bicycle Club, Seattle Neighborhood Greenways, Seattle Subway, Sunrise Seattle, Transportation Choices Coalition, Transit Riders Union, and the Urbanist. They had a candidates forum with mayor candidates on June 16th, and they also had one with folks for City Council position 9 on the 22nd. Cascade Bicycle Club is hosting those videos on their YouTube channel, and so you can come afterwards and grab those links and go directly to the videos, or just do a quick search on YouTube for Cascade Bicycle Club's YouTube channel right after you do a search for the West Seattle Transportation Coalition's YouTube channel, and subscribe to our channel and hit the bell for notifications, and then head over to Cascade Bicycle Club and do the same thing there. Without further ado, I know I saw Mike slip in. We turn for our final guest of the evening, question and answers with the Seattle Times Traffic Lab. And so I think Mike conned one of his colleagues to join him here as well. But we've been chatting for a while about wanting to invite Mike over here and finding the right time to do so. I know Mike, Mike, you're over here in West Seattle with us, aren't you? And he's been covering transportation issues for at least 20 years, I think, since you got tossed onto the monorail project, which is how we first met.
May 2002, the Seattle Popular Monorail Authority issued its ballot plan while Michael Taylor Judd I think you were paid outreach staff, right?
I was, yes.
Right on. Okay. Yeah, and a lot of time has gone by. My youngest daughter, whom we adopted in 2003, has already made it all the way through Kathy's School of Dance and now West Seattle Performing Arts, underneath where the monorail tracks would have bent down to their destination of Morgan Junction. So she's going off to college in Southern California, and there's no monorail and no ST3 for a while. So just because everybody's been Zooming for a whole hour now, folks are probably worn out. Rather than give a real introduction, I'll reset where we are in Sound Transit 3 as of today. I know Tracy, I think, followed this at West Seattle blog, so you can get a better version from her, but I'll just whip through it. The chairman, Kent Keel from University Place near Tacoma, has been doing some shuttle diplomacy with the board members, mostly with the outlying board members, it appears, more than Seattle. But he issued his first cut at how to trim and delay projects to meet their $8 billion or so budget deficit. And what's in there for West Seattle is a suggested West Seattle to Soto line in 2032. So 2 years later than what the ballot promised. And then 2038 to go from Ballard, Smith Cove, and the second tunnel through downtown. So that's where they're at. That area alone, the Ballard, West Seattle downtown, the entire thing rose from 7 billion on the ballot to 12.5 billion estimated now. And that's not including a tunnel into the peninsula. That is for an elevated route comparable to what was presented on the ballot and lampooned by folks like Avalon Tom at the community forums. One of the main differences, well, right of way within Seattle went up $680 million. These are just estimates. And in West Seattle, the routes that Sound Transit came up with did things like destroy either the Spruce Apartments or the new Maris Apartments at the corner of Alaska Fauntleroy. Each of those is worth more than $250 million, actually a lot more. You're doing transit-oriented development. How wise is it to even consider demolishing newish multifamily housing? So, those are costs that they can trim if the staff and board at Sound Transit got really intense about finding other station sites or maybe using more public right-of-way, although there are reasons citizens would object to that. I won't go all the way through the scenarios right now, but that's where they're at today. In July, there will probably be some counter proposal or pushback from the Seattle members, either ideas to get more money, to do it faster, or to give a better ranking to projects within the city, like the 130th or the Graham Street stations. Okay. Other than that, I'll take questions either about the Seattle Times Traffic Lab or about recent coverage in West Seattle.
Why don't you give a little bit of background quickly? A lot of folks may not be aware of a couple of these labs that the Times has set up, and sort of what's different and special about these focuses around specific issues.
Now, I don't feel any more special than 3 years ago, but what the labs are they're philanthropy funded groups within the newsroom. So we started out with 3 reporters and an editor, and we had 7 or 8 donors. I think we're down to 3 or 4, and they contribute so that we can hire a couple more journalists. So Michelle Bruckman, who's not here, but is the engagement editor, moderates things that we do. She is lab funded, and we had Heidi Groover as an additional reporter who's lab funded. Currently, we're down to me, and then Michelle was shared with the education team for a while. So we're not quite as labby as the other labs. We have Project Homeless. There's new mental health lab type team being set up. And the largest group is the education lab, the highest profile group maybe. So we're supposed to do more than just put out daily stories. We're supposed to have community gatherings. Traffic Lab has had a couple of them. Do more Facebook Live, Q&A, more reader involvement and engagement. But we don't do as much as we can or should, but that's part of the mission. And our editors are glad to take citizen ideas for news outreach and engagement.
All right, thanks. I see Deb's hand up.
Hey, Mike, we're so glad to have you join us because we talk about you all the time when we meet. And I don't even know if you can honestly answer this question because you live up the hill. You're west. You got a West Seattle face, whatever. But from in your opinion, since the Times is a citywide newspaper, is anyone other than D1 caring / tracking / giving a hoot about the bridge closure?
Well, I don't know how you quantitatively measure hoots. People from other districts do talk about the West Seattle Bridge closure as evidence that bridges in general need to be maintained more. So candidate Art Langley and Lance Randall, who I guess on this mayor spectrum would represent the right side of the 8 leaders, they talk about it all the time that the West Seattle Bridge shows that we need to put our car tab money in our next levy into modernizing the Ballard, Fremont, and University bridges. So that's the main way the West Seattle Bridge is showing up right now in city politics. There's no immediate bonding or financial decision right now to be made. The city council and staff somehow found $100 million between the mattress pads and is getting a little bit of federal aid in 2020, which should keep things going for a while. I mean, they're even dropping $5 million or so on designing the new West Seattle Bridge, which we're not supposed to need if the repairs are successful for another 30 years. So anyway, I devoted most of last year working on West Seattle Bridge issues, but have consciously tried to pay more attention to other parts of town in 2021. So you haven't seen me, take a deep dive into the West Marginal Way bike lane controversy, for instance.
Okay. All righty. Well, we appreciate whatever you put out that has the peninsula involved, as always.
Anything in the chat, Kate?
John asked, how did you end up getting the gig as a transportation reporter?
Well, it's not that prestigious. In 2002, we had money and an ambitious executive editor that wanted to expand transportation coverage, and they blew up the team to 6 people. That gave me the opportunity to apply and move over from covering Bellevue City Council and city affairs to transportation. And they had a structure where they had a 10,000-foot reporter who would talk about how do you solve sprawl and congestion, and then a 1,000-foot reporter, which is how do you build a project, where do you put it? That's what I took. Then we had another person who was the C-level reporter who did reader questions and how do you get around the barricades on Aurora.
Okay, thanks. I think Marty was waving his hand, maybe? No, okay. I don't see anything else in the chat. I've got a question though. Have you ever delved into how much transportation projects spend on outreach, as a percentage of the total project, and how that compares to other cities? Is the Seattle process a real thing, or does everybody do this?
Yeah, it's a real thing. projects in cities are so different that it would be a multi-month task to really do that kind of comparison. I mean, but there are, I'll just go to one piece of history. The Washington Department of Transportation spent about $300 million on preliminary design, outreach, engineering, taking at least a quick look at 75 different permutations for replacing the Alaskan Way Viaduct between 2001, the Nisqually earthquake, and 2009. At the time, Governor Gregoire in December of 2009 had semi-secret meetings with a lot of movers and shakers around the waterfront. And then in January announced the Deep Bore Tunnel. The Deep Bore Tunnel used almost none of the research and outreach that was accumulated at a cost of $300 million over the previous 7 to 8 years. I wrote about that, but it only appeared in a blog for a few hours that nobody saw deep in the bottom of the paper, just because I don't remember what was happening, but there was some other overwhelming news going on. The head of the project told me, oh, 15% for design, it's nothing unusual. But this was not 15% for design. This was 15% to figure out what to do. And mostly what they got out of it was a sense of how crappy the other alternatives were. And I did use some of their research to good benefit by writing 2 cover stories that a new viaduct would be 50% bigger than the old one. And it would not only loom over the waterfront, it would totally cover it. And that played some role in the ultimate decision making. So maybe you can't say it's a total waste, but it's
a lot of money.
It's a very long and cumbersome process. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I had a hunch. John, you're waving at me.
So Mike, when one reads the comments sections of the online comment sections, and it seems like, and you mentioned Tracy in the West Seattle blog earlier, we see it on the West Seattle blog, but not quite the same extent as on the Times website. It seems like there's a lot of people weighing in that don't really have a whole lot of interest in sort of thoughtful engagement with transportation policy. It seems like a lot of, why isn't Aurora 5 lanes each way? Those idiots in Seattle, don't know what they're doing, and that's why I'm stuck in traffic. How is it for you as, trying to write a story when a large constituency of your audience doesn't seem like they have any interest in kind of learning or coming up with reasonable or plausible solutions?
Yeah. Well, I mean, besides mediocre wages, that would be the reason I got out of the business if I ever get out of it. But in my transportation tribe who read Traffic Lab, most of the people are pretty reasonable. I was stopped just the other day by somebody I've never seen before on the street who recognized my blue beach bike and said, hey, we love your stuff in the Times and read it all, read it. I keep a pretty tight ship in the comment sections. When fallacies come up, I usually point to accurate information. And if people get, it's not as vulgar or racist or mean-spirited as comments in a lot of other stories. But, I won't think twice about, I do have the power to jump in and just erase a comment if it gets too far, but it doesn't happen that much with transportation. Other issues, police misconduct, police reform, even taxes trigger people a lot more than in the transportation stuff.
Just seems like a common trope is the old, war on cars, whatever. Seattle does something, no matter what it is, it's war on cars. And
yeah, well, I definitely have Twitter followers who want to wage war on cars, but whatever. I've gotten away from using war metaphors in news stories a long time ago. Complain if you ever see some.
Marty, you've got a question now?
Yes, I'm off mute. It's a good thing. Mike, it's nice to see you.
Hey, Martin.
Thanks for joining us. I've got 2 questions. The first one, The first one is the last Sound Transit Board meeting, they were talking about pushing the West Seattle link out to 2040 at the latest. So we'd be 10 years later than they originally said. So I'm just curious, given their debt situation and so on, why is Sound Transit averse to considering saving money and delivering a link ahead of schedule and on time, or ahead of time and under budget with a gondola? What do you think is, what's your thinking, or what's your take on their thinking?
Yeah, well, I'm not sold or persuaded that gondola is the best idea. I've kind of looked at it a little bit, but not gone in depth. It's definitely the best idea to get to Simon Fraser University in Burnaby, but West Seattle, I don't want to, without getting into the pros and cons of that right now, since most people here probably know more than I do about the gondolas. Reasons why Sound Transit might dismiss gondola out of hand. The main reason, well, one reason is that they've been marketing light rail since the mid-90s, and people in West Seattle have been paying taxes, and they probably size up, people who are from West Seattle, like Joe McDermott and Dow Constantine, that they probably are sizing up that most of their constituents are going to side with light rail. But that aside, Sound Transit 3 is based on the idea that West Seattle is the starting point for high capacity lines. You might never fill 4-car trains with 800 people at Alaska Junction, but they want that train to weave through downtown and go out to Everett for part of a network that can move 48,000 people an hour through downtown. So nobody is talking about treating West Seattle as a spur except temporarily until they can get the Ballard part done. Gondola locks them into a spur, which is not necessarily wrong, but it's something that Sound Transit, it goes against the strategy that Sound Transit has held for decades, which is to build spines and build through systems. But light rail is what they know, what they do, what they've been marketing. Gondola might create some of the same outrage in neighborhoods as Elevated does, to have these structures up above. I have a feeling that the politicians are only going to accept the tunnel, but we'll see. Gondola has some benefits. It's probably cheaper. It doesn't tear up the streets. It's a lot less bulk than an elevated line. So there are some pros on the gondola side, but anyway, but light rail is basically Sound Transit's mission, and it'd take a lot to push them off of it.
Mm-hmm. And so they expect this mass movement sometime 15 years from now or 20 years from now?
A mass movement for gondola?
The mass beginning here. It sounds like this is a spur anyway, because I don't think they're going to be able to bulldoze 3 to 5 miles of West Seattle streets, residences, and businesses to get down to White Center or Burien. So,
in that sense, it's. I would probably predict you're right in that sense, that going from Alaska Junction to High Point and White Center is
fantasy.
Is very remote. There are other places like Aurora that would get Sound Transit 4 and 5 resources way before some investment in going that direction. But we're still juggling, they're still juggling Sound Transit 3. Sound Transit 3 is still very much in a fog. So yeah, they went to community meetings and everybody wanted to make sure that the station points south so they can keep going to High Point and White Center. But if you think there's controversy going through Avalon, wait till somebody proposes running through the Fairmount Park area through High Point.
Yeah. Well, they started the study in 2014 and they vetted gondolas for just this purpose, to get from a local area to the spine. So I'm still wondering, why not just continue the study and do an apples to apples comparison?
Yeah, I mean, that's more of a suggestion than a question.
Uh-huh.
What does happen politically is that the longer leadership delays, or the more they run into financial problems, the more citizens come forward with other concepts, including the gondola.
Mhm.
If Sound Transit had moved very quickly out of the starting blocks in 2017, we probably wouldn't be talking about gondolas. But it's 2021 and things still don't look very, very sturdy as to exactly what's going to get built.
It's marvelous. Thanks. Oh, my second question is, what are the prospects? What prospects do you think there are for Sound Transit's SDOT to fully get its maintenance budget funded? It's about 80% below what it needs to be at this point.
You mean bridge maintenance or all sorts of funds?
And road maintenance too, but bridge maintenance for sure.
Well, yeah, I think for the foreseeable future, there'll always be playing catch up. There's just too many other desires that folks have to devote an entire levy to road and bridge maintenance, for instance. And you may not even want that. They're having trouble just giving SDOT the $8 million they want right now to replace the electronics on their draw spans. And you know, there was this thing, some of you have been reading the stories. Last fall, 3 of the council members wanted to use a $20 car tab fee for bridges.
Yeah.
And then other members said, no, that's too car centric. Let's take it to a community process. And then in the community process, they went to outreach with folks who don't normally participate, try to get a diverse ethnically, economically neighborhoods. And then that process was kind of, SDOT went into that process pitching, you know, give like a quarter, a third to everything. They kind of portrayed that in their educational materials, and that's what that came back out too. Mm-hmm. And so in any event, the safety projects are also highly valuable as well. You know, we had that crash at Michigan and Corson, a bicyclist was killed. The neighborhoods in the valley desperately need better safety. They need street trees, traffic calming, and in any event, the city council feels that pull to. They passed in May. They passed. I guess it's a resolution. Maybe it's an ordinance that told SDOT to come back with $75 million. I think it was of bridge and major maintenance, but didn't commit to that. It also had language that you would just spread it through all kinds of different uses throughout the city. So the short answer is we're going to be playing catch up for a long time because both the road and bridge needs and the safety needs are all immense.
So they're just going to be throwing what they can at emergencies and leaving the regular maintenance deferred, it sounds like.
Well, yeah, although in West Seattle, there are a couple things to feel satisfied about.
Yeah.
The lower 35th Avenue area near Avalon, I think Tracy's husband was down there when it broke a leak that night and spewed water all over lower 35th next to Habit because the road, the roads were completely destroyed and the infrastructure underneath wasn't much better. So that's all fixed now. It was really strenuous to ride the bus through there for a couple of years, but that's all fixed with strong concrete that supports bus service. So that's done. Avalon Way is paved, and Delridge is using a lot of transit dollars that will not just rebuild that for buses, but also benefit all other users, including sidewalks and personal drivers. So there, I mean, there's stuff going on. It's just Seattle was built out mostly in the mid 20th century, and everything is hitting the end of its lifespan. And we all coasted through the 80s and the 90s, just letting all these materials do their thing.
Yeah.
So I see a couple of questions are coming over there on the chat, Kate, but I'll slip a quick question in here, Mike, in terms of, you know, story ideas and things. Have you ever thought of looking at how, you know, you talked about sort of, you know, kind of how does the agency or how does the board sort of look at, you know, light rail starting in West Seattle and running through a whole system. But one of the issues that many folks have brought up around here before is that, you know, well, lots of complaints about our transportation planning here, but with light rail, that we're doing sort of this odd hybrid here in a way that a lot of folks are not so sure has been done anywhere else. And I wonder if you looked at sort of, you know, comparing us to other places, are they building this kind of hybrid where we have sort of, you know, we have one agency, we have one mode of transit that's trying to serve both this kind of like short urban inner city neighborhood connections, as well as this larger connecting regional centers or job and residential centers, and trying to do that with the same system seems to be part of the reason we get some of the problems that we have with it.
Well, that's one of the big dilemmas with Sound Transit 3 that you've seized on. By the time all the stations are built, Tacoma to Seattle is going to be over 70 minutes, and Everett is in the same ballpark. You know, Everett, the Snohomish County folks, right before Sound Transit 3 said they absolutely have to have a loop that goes through Payne Field and then back to I-5 instead of running straight through from Everett. So, you know, you have that, and then on the other side, you have a couple infill stations in Seattle that the Graham Street station has a lot of support because they skipped it earlier. And so you've got this gap in the middle of the neighborhood. And then there was a lot of testimony for the Boeing Access Road infill station, which was going to be a park and ride so folks can pull up short in their cars and not sit all day on I-5 along Beacon Hill. So there's, in any event, you put those in and then do everything else, and pretty soon you've got a 70-minute trip from Tacoma to Seattle on light rail. But it's a hybrid, not just in that way, but also in just the trains and tracks. So, you know, Washington, D.C. Metro might run an 8 or a 10 car train and never have any grade crossings, pretty much underground. And then you have Portland, which has historically run 4 light rail lines across a drawbridge, and then almost all on street, only a little bit that runs in a tunnel on the west side and along the freeway on the east side, but a lot of in-street running. So Sound Transit is right in the middle of that. It's kind of fast, but it's not full on subway, and it's kind of got good capacity, but both transit fans and transit opponents think the 4-car trains are going to fill up, and then you're not going to be able to expand the stations. Then the only solution is to run them more frequently. You know, Vancouver, BC can run them 2 minutes apart, but we can't because we have grade crossings in different parts of the line and human drivers, and it's not an automatic system. So we're hybrid in that sense too. So, you know, editors read something that's slapped together on the East Coast or overseas comparing costs of projects, and when you start looking under the hood, and our project really is a lot different from the others.
All right, back to the chat. Are you planning to do a story on third-party funding? I assume that means Sound Transit tunneling, Deb?
Yeah, so in a sense, third-party funding is the only thing I've actually written about this spring. There momentum with Senators Cantwell and Murray to get a $2 billion budget boost. It would be in the form of after the fact grants to Linwood and Federal Way, but that would relieve some pressure. So there are other kinds of third-party funding. There could be a citywide ballot measure to put some extra money into getting tunnels instead of drawbridges in Ballard and West Seattle. Pay for infill stations so they don't fall victim to the budget acts, things like that. Elected officials talked a lot about that a couple of years ago. I haven't heard much lately. And in the mayor's race, most of the questions and answers have been along the lines of local car tabs for free bus service or for bridges. So I don't know if any, well, there's a whole other issue of public-private partnerships and getting in the land business. Both Washington state law and sound transit policies really don't let them buy a bunch of land around the stations and then speculate and sell it to developers. The other extreme of that is Hong Kong, where the transit agency will actually partner to fill in the harbor and build towers on it, and then put a train, an airport fast train underneath. So we've taken the different tack on the state and sound transit level, which is to condemn the absolute minimum amount of land and use it for social housing to relieve the housing crisis now. But there are examples of in the world of trying to grab a bunch of money. Maybe something more plausible for Seattle is called tax increment financing, which it's similar to an LID, local improvement district, where you assess a special tax on the value of land around the stations, and the idea that it gets more valuable if you build stations. And you take the increase in that property value and tax that and use it for the transit. That's a third-party funding that could really happen in Seattle. And I haven't written a story just about that. It's not very sexy. If a number of people contact editors, it might happen. I have mentioned it. I did mention it in a story, and I think I've got the link here to that story. I did mention it for a few sentences. There it is.
Okay, great. How about this one? Inspired by your recent article addressing the 2017 Amtrak crash, based on your experience, are there any areas of concern for the overall safety picture of the ST3 rail plans?
Not especially. To the best of my knowledge, I don't think any of the ST3 lines run on street across car and pedestrian traffic. ST2 has a very small area near the Bellevue Spring District that runs at grade, but it's not much. I think it's only 1 or 2 streets. And Tacoma has a streetcar that runs in the street, and it's going to go through the hilltop and over to community college. But that's a slow train, and if it stalls, it's not going to tie up the whole region. Sound Transit has put up with their original Rainier Valley design that has 28 grade crossings in it and more than 100 collisions since 2009. And there's been no real move to reduce the number of grade crossings. You could probably take away some of the smaller street crossings and have fewer cars turning left in front of the trains and so forth. But it wouldn't solve all the safety problems out there. But in any event, ST3 doesn't appear to create obvious safety problems that are new.
Okay, Marty?
There's just one new potential safety problem with Seattle, and that's 150-foot high pylons for the rail deck. Nobody's ever attempted that in the world before. So what's the...
Yeah, I think the pylons in Tukwila might be 100 or slightly over. 150-foot pylons, the way you build 150-foot pylons is to make them super thick. And this was this is a more epic version of what happened with the monorail. They originally promised 3-foot diameter round columns that look like poles. They look like, you know, they look like part of Seattle Center in the original concept, but they eventually became 4.5, 5 feet wide by the time it got around to the bid process. So, yeah, I mean, they could probably go 150 feet up, but you're not going to like what it looks like up near the ground.
I've heard 14 feet diameter.
I haven't looked at the ratios, but it wouldn't surprise me to go over 10 feet to do that. You know, the West Seattle Bridge actually, you know, light rail wouldn't be quite as large as the West Seattle Bridge, but then again, the seismic standards now are higher. And I don't know, how thick are the West Seattle Bridge columns? Are they 10, 12? I knew that 6 months ago, but
big.
Yeah, that's an issue that's come up a lot in the at the Masonic Lodge in West Seattle late at night.
How big? Really big.
Well, if they go 150 feet, yeah, if they go 150 feet high, I mean, there might, I can imagine ways to not go that high, but they create other trade-offs that I'll save for a future story.
The gondola concept is going to be narrower.
So is this a gondola concept? How high is the gondola concept? And are you thinking of steel structures that look like TV towers or what? Yeah.
And very few of them, as opposed to dozens.
All right, you guys talk offline.
Go discuss gondola over a beer in Morgan Junction.
That's a good idea.
All right. Do we have any other questions?
I'm at the end of the chat.
Hey.
Well, it looks like we were managing to run on time this evening. I'm quite shocked.
Well, great. Thanks for having me on. My direct phone number is 206-515-5631. Feel free to use it. Everybody else does. And
what was the last four?
5631.
I'll put that there in the chat. And he's also on email.
Yeah.
10, not 2.
Right. And if you click on the story, my email is linked at the bottom of the story, or maybe it's the top.
There you go. Well, thank you so much for being with us, Mike. We appreciate it. Come back again in the future.
Wish I could solve things. Electric bikes has moved to the junction, so if all else fails, check that out. I'm seeing a lot more cargo bikes out these days.
There we go. All right. I am going to keep us moving here as we're approaching the 8:30 end here. But we do have a few more things left on the agenda. We're gonna hop into board member elections. Reminder that we do currently have a vacancy in position 7. For our elections process this evening, we are expecting to re-elect all odd-numbered positions, unless there's some surprise waiting for us. And then the board will elect its officers between now and the July meeting. You can learn more about the board members and who's in the various positions on our website. We'll run through old business and new business. And oh, that's funny, I didn't update this slide. And then we will hopefully adjourn by 8:30. So as I promised a couple of board members, surprise with the photos. So we had some conversations at the board level about, hey, we're in this virtual environment, and how are we going to navigate this this year? And so I am proposing that we move. So I guess I should back up. So currently, these are the board members in positions 1, 3, 5, 9, and 11, which are up for election or re-election this year. As I understand it, all have agreed to stand for re-election. A reminder that position 1 and 5, we actually just filled the temporary vacancy just a month or so ago. So they're fresh-faced compared to the rest of us. As I understand it, everybody is standing for re-election. If that is not the case, please let us know now. And unless there are objections and someone seeks to contest one of those positions, I would move that we re-elect all these board members as one slate by a vote of acclamation. Do I have a second?
I second.
Thank you, Vicki. Are there any objections to moving all 5 members for re-election as a slate?
Michael, can you state the slate, please? Because I'm not seeing a visual.
Oops, am I not? Well, let me try to share again here. Hold on.
Thanks.
I apologize for that. And,
There we go. Oh, there we go.
oops.
And it's gone. Is that one of the?
All right. Hopefully we're good. Yes. All right. So, but I will read for those who maybe are not looking at their screens or on the phone. Actually, I think we might have someone on the phone this evening. So that is current board members. Position 1, Jeremy Barton. Position 3 is Mark Jacobs, who's featured there on his bicycle, which is where you will often find him around West Seattle. Position 5 is Phil Frick. Position 9 is John Wright, who is in the bottom right of the slide. And position 11 is Larry Weimer, who I believe is on with us, unless he had to go for one of his sport coaching gigs over there at the stadium. And so Jeremy and Phil are new, so we don't have photos of them yet on the website, but if they'd like to submit them, we can embarrass them in the future too. Again, do I have any objections to the motion to move these forward as a slate?
No objections.
No objection.
All right, not hearing any objections. And everyone who is present, not just board members, can vote for or against the motion. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Aye. Any opposed? And anyone abstaining? All right, well, congratulations on the re-election of our board members. That is all I had there. Let me see if I can find my other slide here. Where did I go? There we are. All right. I don't really have any old business, even though there was a bullet point that popped up on one version of the slide here. So unless anybody can think of something I missed, we'll move to new business. All right, new business. Deb Barker wanted to update us on some staff changes she recently learned about at King County.
Hi, so this is Deb Barker, and I had an email from Melissa Bailey, who is King County Council Member John McDermott's, I call her the transportation guru. She's the transportation policy analyst. And she is leaving McDermott's office on July 1 and going to work for King County Central staff, which gets her involved in a whole lot more issues than transportation. And unfortunately, takes away her great voice from King County District 8 on transportation issues. But she's still around. We'll know how to reach her if there's something that only Melissa knows how to answer. Or knows where something's buried, all that good stuff. And so I'm excited for her change, but I know from working with Melissa on both Sun Transit 3 when I was on the Stakeholder Advisory Group, and also West Seattle Transportation Coalition, as well as anything else transportation related, like a bridge. It's been great having her ear. So I know I'll miss her. And if there's anything that you need out of her, do it before July 1.
There you go. And if you are an expert at transportation policy, it sounds like there might be a position opening soon.
That's what she indicated, that she hasn't seen any of the paperwork that's coming down yet, but undoubtedly that's an important, very important position to for Councilmember McDermott to have filled, and he'll be looking for someone for that.
I'm just going to let it be known I'm very interested and I want to put my name in for it. So
ought to send Joe an email.
Yep, I know. Well, yeah, any advice anybody wants to have, yeah, I'll definitely reach out to Melissa and Joe about that. So
yeah.
Now I also understand, I was hoping maybe he would pop in tonight, but I also understand Chris Arkles is stepping down as a transportation policy advisor in the exec's office.
Wow.
Interesting.
I was hoping he might swing by and confirm that, but that's what I hear in the chatter. So if anybody sees him, check in on that, because that would be another face that we've become quite familiar with for a while, and so that would be quite a bit of change over there on the county side of things.
Yep.
But again, there you go, Larry. You might have two things you could apply for.
No doubt. Yeah, I was trying to get in there about a year ago. So yeah.
There you go. All right.
All right. As well, looking ahead, I think we've mostly only got board members left at the moment. But looking ahead, just a heads up again that typically we take off in August some years. And this year it looks like we probably will be going forward with a board meeting, and that in particular Sound Transit will be coming to get us all up to speed on what's been going on and what they're looking at going forward. And so we're looking forward to that, because they've been very quiet. Well, other than the board, I guess the board's been meeting out in public, but generally speaking, staff's been pretty quiet with heads down, which we hope means they're working hard on good things and not trying to figure out how to roll out bad news to all of us. So do keep an eye out for that in August. And right now we're looking in July at kind of being political things focused on the primary, and we'll see how that plays out. Nothing's finalized yet, but expect we'll come up with something, as we always do.
Is there anything on my to-do list as far as the upcoming meetings? I know I haven't been too present the last few board meetings, so I think seems like I saw something come through. But anything I can do to help with any of the meetings, please let me know, and I'll make sure I get it done.
Nothing with that, but you need to kick my butt offline and get me to go sign sign a signature card so we can get our bank account all set up.
Okay, yeah, I actually went to deposit the money the other day. I didn't have it. I thought I lost it, but then I found it. So yeah, am I able to deposit the money without, or do I need you to check that off before I can make the deposit? Do you know?
I have no idea. So
okay.
Like I said,
well, I'm going to take it in. I'm going to try to get that going. I was kind of waiting until you got that set up, but I'll try to get that in.
Yeah.
So
set up a time. We'll go grab coffee and go do it together.
Okay. Sounds good. Sounds good.
Question from Victoria.
Yes, Vicky. Oh, you're muted.
Are we going to have a general meeting in August or just our board meeting? I was confused.
No, that's what I'm saying. Is typically quite often we have skipped in August, but this year it's still looking like we're going to have a general meeting featuring Sound Transit.
So both board and general. Okay. Yep. Thanks.
Any other new business? All right.
I'll move to adjourn.
Mark loves to do that.
I have a quick comment if I could.
Yes, hop in.
Yeah, I'm on the Board of Trustees for the Historical Society, and we're having a gala in November, and I've been in contact with most of the politicians involving West Seattle, and they've been very helpful in wanting to participate. And so I do have a line to them and their chief of staff. So let me read the names off to you. And if you think any of them might be, you want to have any of them appear for us, I'd be happy to talk to them. Lisa Herbold.
You got it. Just like, well, you know, just look like that.
Teresa Mosqueda.
Something every week.
Lauren Gonzalez, Dow Constantine, Joe McDermott, Senator Nguyen, and Representative Cody, or Elaine Cody, and also Greg Nichols. So if any of those ring a bell that you want to have some contact with that you don't already have, but you want to, I'd be happy to do it.
You know, we've certainly had a number of them before. I'm tempted to say we'd love to have Senator Joe Wynn, because I don't know if we've had him come and speak to us. But as he's running for office right now, I don't know if we want to think through the implications of that, or maybe we just invite him and Dow to come speak at the same meeting.
Okay.
So if you want to work on that,
Sure.
I think it's pretty good odds to assume that both Joe and Dow will be the top two for county exec. So if you want to reach out to them for, say, September,
Okay.
maybe to come speak to us, that might be great.
Happy to. Thanks.
All right. Larry, you're raising your hand, yes? And you're
I just
muted.
say, what's the theme going to be for the Historical Society gala this year? Do you know?
Well, yeah, it's going to be in November. It's going to be virtual like we had last year. We came out really good having a virtual one last year. And what they're going to do is donate an hour of their time to sit down with whoever buys that particular item and have greet and meet with coffee. So.
Yeah, Mike, you mentioned that Dow and Gwen are going to be the top two. Don't discount Good Space Guy. Come on.
I have been on the campaign trail with him more than once. It's always a party when Good Space Guy shows up.
Yeah, where's the Russian? Who was the Russian?
No,
Alex Zimmerman.
Alex, yeah. He's running too.
for an open position, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
All
Lippman
right.
in there anywhere?
No, I think
Gotta have
Stan
Stan
moved
Lippman.
away, didn't he? I think he might have moved away. Don't hold me to that.
Who's this?
Stan Lippman.
Oh. I don't know.
There's
Maybe.
also perennial candidate Richard Pope. That's another one.
Neither of those guys was as entertaining as Alex.
What I will say about Good Space Guy is he is deep and knowledgeable about space transportation. So maybe we want to have him come and talk to us.
Or maybe he should fly up there with Bezos.
There you go. All right. So there's a motion on the table to adjourn. Do I have a second?
Second.
All right. It is good to see everyone. Look at that. We're scooting out, what, 3 minutes early? I will see all you board members soon for our board meeting, and everyone
Bye,
else
everybody.
next month.
Congratulate all the board members.
Don't overheat over the next few days.